So we just got these new starter decks that you can buy from the shop, and I did receive a comment on the last video asking for some more in-depth reviews on these decks. Now, unfortunately, these decks are not available on the desktop client. When you try to load into the deck section on the store, it says no items available. So if you do want to purchase these right now, you'll have to get onto the mobile client, and that's where those decks are actually available. I've logged onto the mobile client myself earlier just to check the pro rating on prices, and they are there for purchase, but not on desktop. I'm not sure why. But anyways, so I'm not going to waste too much time. Let's just get into the decks themselves, and in order to do that, we're going to head on over to magicthegatheringgoldfish.com, take a look at the deck lists, and I will give you my thoughts on them. Okay, so we are going to be going over the two standard decks that are available, because those are going to be the ones that are most relevant to new players. As far as the Brawl decks, I can't really speak too much on Brawl because it's not a format that I focus on a whole lot. So instead, I'm going to be focusing on the two standard decks that are available for us. So first up is the cheaper of the two decks. This is the Dinosaurs deck, running a tabletop cost of $17.80. It runs 18 rares, 19 uncommons, and 13 commons. So based off of that, you probably end up buying a small amount of gems to purchase this online. In the Arena client, if you don't have a single one of these cards, it's going to put you back about 5,310 gems. So that's about a $30 value, as far as USD is considered. I'm sure that'll be different in different regions. Now, the deck itself, it runs a pretty standard, straightforward list. Like, this is not a ramp deck. This is just a, looks like a mid-range 1, 2 into 3 into 4 mana base. The deck tops out at Polani's Hatcher, which is a 5-drop, but also not the best 5-drop either. It could be a good starter, but if I were to build this deck myself, I probably would have skipped Polani's Hatcher and gone straight to, Carnosaur, the 6-mana dinosaur that when it comes into play, it discovers for 5. So I would much rather play that over Polani's Hatcher. But the rest of the deck looks pretty good. You have 4 copies of Rampaging Raptor, which is a great haste creature that you can point at your opponent's face and still deal damage to a planeswalker or a battle, which is good. That's really good. For 4 mana, it's a pretty decent creature. Also, you have the Pugnacious Hammer Skull. It's a 6/6 for 3 mana. It's Kinth, Firstborn of Gishoth. You have the Burning Sun Cavalry. This is probably a card that I wouldn't run myself. I would probably run a little bit more interaction over this card, or maybe just something else entirely. I might even run something like Incy over this. Belligerent Yearling is a good 2-drop. Ixali's Lorekeeper is a good 1-drop. Also, you probably just maybe run the Intrepid Archaeologist over this card because it ramps into your bigger spells and allows you to get dinosaurs back from the graveyard. So that's probably a better call over the Burning Sun Cavalry. In the removal package, you have Shock, you have Triumphant Chomp, Volcanic Spite, and Witchstalker's Frenzy. Now, my only issue here is with the Triumphant Chomp. The Chomp will deal damage to target creature equal to 2, or the greatest power among dinosaurs you control, whichever is greater. So, at worst, it's a shock that targets creatures. At best, it's a dinosaur straight up eating one of your opponent's creatures, which is good, and it fits with the theme. However, this card cannot go face, and that can be a big problem when you just need to get a few extra points of damage across, and your board is completely empty. So I think a couple copies of Lightning Strike and maybe like a 3rd copy of Shock might be better in this situation. You also have Volcanic Spite. Volcanic Spite is decent. It deals damage to a creature or planeswalker or battle, and once the spell resolves, you can cycle another card out of your hand to draw a fresh card. So I do like that you get a little bit of better card selection with this card, but again, the fact that it can't hit face doesn't sit well with me, and especially in a deck where your goal is to put creatures on the table and turn them sideways until your opponent is dead. You really want your removal spells to also be able to hit your opponent in the face. Witchstalker Frenzy kind of gets a pass, though. I like this card in this deck because you're always going to be attacking, and this card is going to be cheaper when you are attacking. And also, it's a really effective way of dealing with something like a Sheoldred, which is something that you really want to be on the lookout for because of the death touch that comes in on Sheoldred. Like that little bit of damage and life gain off of card draw, that's bad, but them being able to chump block even your biggest guy is not that hot. Now looking at the lands, Bristling Backwoods, Copperline Gorge, Forest, Carpelson Forest, Mountain, Restless Ridgeline, Rugged Highlands. I would probably go a little bit heavier on the Carpelson Forests rather than, say, the Rugged Highlands. While the Rugged Highlands is decent and is something that you can play turn one if you don't have any better plays, I would much rather have more copies of Carpelson Forest, a land that comes into play untapped, rather than something that you draw at say turn 3 or 4 when you really needed a land to come into play untapped, and this is all you got. This can honestly lose you a game if you are already behind and you really needed that land to come into play untapped. So that's probably what I would change as far as the mana base is considered. The Bristling Backwoods I would keep because it slaps your opponent, which is good. Carpelson Forest is good. Restless Ridgeline is great just because it's a manland, and I think 2 copies of this is the right number. Copperline Gorge, good, it's a fast land. Yeah, I'd say the only change here is moving these Rugged Highlands out, probably adding 2 more Carpelson Forests, and maybe another Copperline Gorge, something along those lines. That's probably what I would do with this deck. But as far as my long and short on this deck is perfect for a person just starting the game, someone that doesn't necessarily want to spend a lot of time looking over meta reports and figuring out the best things to do. This is a product for someone that just wants to buy a deck that will be ready to go out of the box and just go. Perfect. It's just red and green, stompy creatures, removal, and win games. It's all it is. Probably my biggest gripe with the deck is the Polani's Hatcher. I really don't think this needs to be in this deck. I think this slot would be much better suited to the Carnosaur. The Carnosaur is a much better card. Even though it costs 1 more to cast, it's just better. End of story. Yeah. Okay, so that's my thoughts on the standard Dinosaur deck. Now let's slide on down to the standard Toxic deck. Now this deck is going to be a little bit more powerful and is going to be more expensive as a result. So this deck is going to cost you around 11,280 gems, or roughly $56 USD, based off of what bundles you buy and how much is in your collection already. So tabletop $55.93, Magic the Gathering Online 7.44 tickets. Not so sure about that, because I don't play Magic Online, I play Arena. So this one sports 32 rares, 13 uncommons and 13 commons. You see the 32 rares versus the 18 rares in the other deck. So you're getting almost twice as many rares when you buy this deck. So the deck itself is Bant, Toxic, easy. This is a deck that actually is in standard as like not necessarily a deck to beat, but is definitely a contender. So first up, you have 4 copies of Crawling Chorus, then Skrelv, then we have 4 Rot Priest, Jawbone Duelist, and Slaughter Singer. That's a very solid suite of opening game characters. Your creatures are all costing either 1 or 2 mana. Very aggressive, very low to the ground. It's exactly what a deck like this wants. Your spells, you have 3 copies of Aspirant's Ascent. Now for a single blue mana, instant speed, until end of turn, target creature gets +1/+3 and gains flying and toxic 1. So that toxic 1 stacks on top of the other toxic that a creature already has. So say for example, you have a Jawbone Duelist out. It has toxic 1 and double strike. So it's going to, if it goes unblocked, it's going to do 2 poison to your opponent. If you do Aspirant's Ascent, give it flying, then that's toxic 1 plus toxic 1. So if this thing hits, it's going to deal 4 poison damage. Pretty damn cool. Or 5 if you have a Venerated Rot Priest on the table already and you target your Jawbone Duelist with Aspirant's Ascent. So that's pretty cool. I like that. Next up we have Rona's Vortex. Rona's Vortex is decent in this deck. I would probably go with something else though, because you don't have the black mana to pay the kicker cost. Because this deck is white, blue, and green, you don't have the black mana. Other than that, we have Shore Up, 3 of those. That's a very good card for protecting your creatures. And then 3 Bring the Ending, which starts the game as like a kind of mana leak kind of card, but as the game progresses and you get poison counters on your opponent, it becomes a straight up counter spell, which is great. I actually really like this card in blue-black Toxic. Then we have 3 copies of Serum Snare. Return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If that permanent had mana value 3 or less, proliferate. Proliferate's great. Adding more poison counters or +1 counters if you happen to be going that route. Then enchantments, you have 4 copies of Skrelv's Hive. That's pretty solid right there. And if you look right here, it shows Skrelv's Hive is running like $8 in paper right now. So 4 copies of that, shit, that's $32 worth of value right there. Pretty good. Let's see. Unless, of course, they're counting this as $8 for all 4 of them. I'm not too positive on that. I'm not sure how exactly they are pricing their website here. So, moving on to the lands. We have 4 Outercar Wastes, 3 Botanical Sanctum, Island, 3 copies of Mirrex, 1 Plains. You have a Razorverge Thicket, Seachrome Coast, and 4 copies of the Seed Core, which is great for pumping up your small poisonous creatures. So, as far as the deck itself, this is solid. This is a solid deck. The creatures, I probably wouldn't do anything to. The creature suite is sweet. The only green cards in your deck are Venerated Rot Priest and Slaughter Singer. I would potentially drop the green from this deck if it weren't for Venerated Rot Priest. The Rot Priest is so good and so integral to this deck winning that you kind of need the green in here just for this. Can you win without it? Yes. Is it a lot easier to win with the Rot Priest on the table? Absolutely. Slaughter Singer is also great. Good card for pumping your other toxic creatures. Then Aspirant's Ascent is good. Rona's Vortex, I would probably swap this out for Into the Floodmaw. It's a new blue bounce card that costs only a single blue. Shore Up is great for this deck. Bring the Ending is also great, and also Serum Snare. I like that we're running Shore Up in this deck instead of a green protection spell, because it means that you don't have to go too deep into the green side of the mana base with this deck, because again, the only green cards in the deck are Venerated Rot Priest and Slaughter Singer. So this is mostly an Azorius deck that splashes green for a few key cards. That's it. The 4 copies of Skrelv Hive is absolutely important. You notice it is not a legendary enchantment, so you can have as many of these out as you want, so long as you have the life to pay for it. And then, as far as the mana base is considered, mana base looks pretty decent. I might go down 1 on the Seed Core and up 1 on the Mirrex, just to have a better chance of drawing more Mirrex and having the opportunity to pump out Mirrex tokens every turn. Because this is a deck that spends its early turns putting threats on the table early, and then the mid-game to late game is all about holding that mana open to protect your creatures and have counter spells and things like that at the ready to make sure that your guys connect. So very important, kind of like 1-2 punch here. Like turns 1 and 2, put dudes on the table. Turns 3 through 5, bounce, protect, counter spells, all the good stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much the deck right there. Now, if I were to purchase one deck over the other, it would definitely be this deck. Yeah, I don't mind paying a little bit more in gems to get the guts of this deck, because also bear in mind that you don't have to keep this deck intact once you purchase it. You can take them apart and use the cards for other decks, because what you're doing here is you're not buying the deck, you're buying all the cards in the deck and unlocking them for your collection, so you can then use them for whatever you want to. If you've got a better idea for what this deck should look like, by all means, bust it up, make your own deck. Easy. Yeah. Okay, so that's it right there. Once again, I will leave a link to this article in the description box so you guys can take a look at these yourself, maybe download them, build them yourself, go on the mobile client to purchase the deck if that's something that you want. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I really don't have much else to say on it. That is my full review of each of these decks. The decks are solid. This one is perfect for a beginner coming right out the gate. Maybe once you understand a little bit more about the game and how the meta works, maybe upgrade to the standard Toxic. Either way, both these decks are really easy to play, really straightforward. It's playing dudes, turning dudes sideways, and profit. That's all it is. So there you go. That's the decks. Go have some fun. And in the meantime, go enjoy some games. I'll see you next time.